performance index is a calculation of achievement found on the local report card produced by the Ohio Department of Education. The performance index is also used in several reports produced by the Buckeye Community Hope Foundation. In its simplest terms, it's an achievement report that rewards students for performing at higher and higher levels on the state assessments. Those would be end-of-course tests and OST tests that are taken in grades 3 through 8. So in this example that I'm going to show, we're going to say that we had 5 students that didn't take the test. Those 5 students are worth 0 points, but they're added into the denominator as students that should have been tested. At the lowest level, limited, we had 15 students that performed at that level, and those are worth 0.3 points in a weighted points, and basic, we had 30 students performed at the basic level. Those are worth 0.6. Proficient, we had 45 students. Accelerated, we had 35 students scored at the accelerated level on the test. And for performance index, this would be all the tests that the students took. So the same student may have been advanced on their math and maybe accelerated in their reading. Those are all added together for the performance index on the local report card. We can separate those out by subject, but for the local report card, for the achievement section, those are added together. For the GAP report, they are separated out by subgroups such as race, students with disability, and so forth, which we'll get to that in just a little bit. So in this case, we had 140 students. Let's look at the limited row. 15 students represents 10.7% of those 140 students. That percentage is multiplied by 0.3, that's the weight for that performance level, and gives the number of performance index points. Had 100% of the students been limited, that would have been 30 points. As we move down the list, each performance level goes up in their weight. So it will always be the percent of students, in this case 21.4% of the students were basic, 21.4 times the 0.6 gives us the performance index points. Once we've done that calculation for all the performance levels, we get the total performance index, 84.3. Well, 84.3 is 70.2% of the possible 120. The 120 comes from 100% of the students being advanced, being the maximum performance index. You want to keep in mind there is a way to go above. There is an advanced plus category, and that is used with students that are accelerated and perform at an advanced level. Those can go up to 1.3, but for this example, we're going to keep it at the 1.2. And the calculations on the local report card keep the maximum at 120, and they take the percentage of the total points earned. On the local report card, you'll see a percentage of the points earned, and some of the reports that Buckeye Community Hope Foundation uses, as well as the GAP report, they use the actual performance index points. So in this case right here, 84.3 points is 70.2% of the total possible, which puts this score in the C range. On the local report card, they don't give you quite as much detail in the performance index, but they give you the percent of students at each of the levels of achievement. In this case, this district scored 103 of the possible 120 points for 83.6%, which gives that district a B. Notice that in this case, this particular school did have some students at the advanced level, and those points were weighted at 1.3. The total performance index is 100.3, but 83.6% puts them in the B range. You'll also see performance index calculations on the GAP report. These are much more specific than the overall performance index. In this case, English language arts tests are separated from the math tests, and each one is calculated with performance index. And then each of those are divided out by subgroups, which are all students, Hispanic students, white students, students with disabilities, Asian Pacific Islanders, multiracial and economically disadvantaged students. Our schools are required to give a progress monitoring assessment in the fall and then either the winter or spring, or in many cases, they give it in both the winter and the spring. So our schools are giving these progress monitoring tests 3 times a year. And one of the calculations that Buckeye Community Hope Foundation performs is a performance index projection. In this case, the performance index is calculated as an overall, a reading, and a mathematics. Because the local report card does not use kindergarten first and second performance index calculation, because those tests don't exist, we are able to do a projection up to 3rd grade, and so therefore when we do our overall reading and math calculations, we do include kindergarten first and second. But because of the calculation methods used by local report card, our schools want to know what their performance index projection is likely to be for their 3 through 8 students. So that section, performance index 3rd through 8th students, that represents the best projection of the local report card by the end of the year. This does a calculation from the previous administration, so in the fall that calculation is from the previous fall. When the winter version of this report comes out, it would be the fall of the current year to the winter, and then a spring version of the report would be the fall of the current year to the spring. The data is calculated as showing you whether that score had gone up or down from the previous administration, but the boxes with the performance index are color-coded based on the scale, which I'll show in just a second. The scale of the points earned. The scale used on the Norm Reference Test Performance Index Projection Report from Buckeye Community Hope Foundation is the same scale as used at the beginning of this presentation. They are color-coded based on the percent of the possible points earned, remembering that 120 would be the highest and 30 would typically be the lowest if all the students were projected to be at the limited level. So in the example that we had here, most of the scores were in the orange box, which would represent 60 to 83.9 performance index points, or 50 to 69% of the total possible points earned. More information about performance index can be found on the Ohio Department of Education's website just by searching performance index and looking at the calculations.